My name is Matt Casper, and I did my project on the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I want you all to take a moment to think of Alaska. Even if you haven't been there, most people tend to think of beautiful landscapes, crystal clear water, perfectly snow-capped mountains, and breathtaking wildlife. What could possibly go wrong with that? As it turns out, a lot can go wrong in a lot of ways. Due to careless negligence and complete disregard for maritime safety laws and regulations by Captain Joseph Hazelwood and some of his crew, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker ran aground on March 24, 1989. The 987-foot-long vessel was loaded with 53 million gallons of oil, or 1.25 million barrels of oil, on a trip starting in the port of Valdez, Alaska, and ending in Long Beach, California. Unfortunately, the oil tanker never reached its destination, as it instead collided with the Bligh Reef, a well-known navigational hazard in Prince William Sound. Soon after impact with the reef, the ship ruptured 8 of its 11 cargo tanks, spilling almost 11 million gallons of crude oil into the pristine water. Oil washed up on almost 1,300 miles of Alaskan coastline. Upwards of 250,000 birds, 3,000 sea otters, and 300 seals were killed as an immediate result, and even though none of the crew was harmed in the original incident, 4 people died during the cleanup effort. It took Exxon 3 days to begin cleanup efforts, even though the incident was reported immediately. This is because Exxon did not have the cleanup equipment readily available, and by the time that they did, the spill was well past the point of containment. Exxon spent over $2.1 billion on cleaning up the oil from shorelines, and it involved over 10,000 workers, 1,000 boats, and 100 planes and helicopters. Cleanup also involved burning the oil, pressure washing it off the shores, scrubbing it off the animals, and using planes to release chemicals into the water that break down and disperse the oil. Not only was it catastrophic for the environment, but the effects of the spill can still be felt by people today. Many fisheries, specifically ones for shrimp, salmon, and herring, were closed for the rest of the year through 1990. On top of that, neither the herring or salmon populations in the region recovered, so neither did the fisheries, and that resulted in a huge loss of income for so many people. As well as it being a loss of income, it was also a loss of a heavily relied upon food source for over 2,000 Alaskan Native Americans and 13,000 others who held subsistence permits. This continues to be a problem today because people are still afraid of eating the potentially contaminated fish even after all this time. The fishing industry and those who relied on it were not the only ones to suffer though, because so did the tourism industry for the area. As a result of the incident, the tourism industry lost over 26,000 jobs as well as over $2.4 billion in sales. This industry mostly recovered, however there are still people who believe that the area is still contaminated and refuse to visit. To understand exactly why all this happened, it is important to recognize that Captain Joseph Hazelwood was an alcoholic for up to 3 years before this incident. Exxon ignored reports of his relapses and neglected to enforce the company's own substance abuse policies. At the time of the accident, Hazelwood's license for operating vehicles, such as the oil tanker, had been revoked for being caught operating a vehicle under the influence. Not only that, but Hazelwood also had several alcoholic beverages earlier that same evening. To add to the already bad situation, Hazelwood was the only person on board with the qualifications to navigate the Exxon Valdez through Prince William Sound. But in his drunken state, he commanded the third mate, who had already worked a 15-hour shift, who was nowhere near qualified enough to steer the large vessel through the bay, and that led to the crash into Bligh Reef. The Exxon Valdez oil spill is ranked as the 34th worst oil spill globally, but it was the first and worst major environmental incident in America since the 3 Mile Island incident in 1979. Compared to other oil spills in and around the United States, such as the BP oil spill in 2010 and the Shell oil spill in mid-May 2016, it was the most environmentally damaging. It had a volume almost 10 times that of the Shell oil spill, but the BP Deepwater Horizon spill had an estimated volume of almost 9.5 times what Exxon Valdez spilled. The Exxon Valdez accident resulted in significantly more dead birds and marine life, as well as more total coastline affected. Because the Exxon Valdez crashed on a reef close to shore, it didn't take much time for the oil to reach over 1,300 miles of coastline, whereas the BP spill occurred 42 miles off the coast of Louisiana and only reached about 1,100 miles of coastline. There were also differences in the type of oil. While the oil from both incidents were biodegradable, the oil in the Exxon Valdez was heavier, more viscous, and more toxic, and therefore harder to clean up, compared to the oil from the BP incident, which was lighter and considered sweeter because it was less viscous. The cleanup strategies were also different for the two spills. This is because the Exxon Valdez spill was the first major oil spill in American water, and therefore no one was prepared to deal with the fallout of such a high-volume accident. By the time of the BP and Shell oil spills, though, there was more awareness of the dangers of oil in water and better technology that allowed spills to be cleaned up faster and easier, and to a greater extent. The most significant legislation passed in response to the Exxon Valdez oil spill was the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 that was created and passed by the U.S. Congress to mitigate and prevent further oil spills off the coast of the United States in the future. If there is anything to be learned from this incident, it is to not drink and drive, because the consequences affect more than just yourself.